Okay, we are live. Good morning, hello, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Tetrate Tech Talks. Tetrate Tech Talks is a weekly live stream where we feature conversation with a guest and or discuss technology and do technical demonstrations and more. Tetrate is the enterprise service mesh company, and much of our focus is on Istio, Envoy, and Kubernetes, and other related technologies, but we won't shy away from other topics. My name is Eitan Suez. It is Friday, June 3rd. I hope you are doing well. I would like to welcome you to our Tetrate Tech Talks. What you're seeing in that little window to the right is essentially our landing page. And I'd like to share with you the URL to our landing page, which contains all of the links and everything that we're going to discuss in this episode, and also give you access to past and future episode information. So go ahead and bookmark that. And let's dive into our episode 9. Again, Friday, June 3rd, it's 9 a.m. Pacific time. I come to you from Austin, Texas. Central time is 11 a.m. And we've got an exciting session lined up for you. All right, so I like to always begin with a little bit of a preface, a little bit of a meta information about these Tetrate Tech Talks. They're a series of broadcasts that runs weekly on Friday, and that we broadcast to both YouTube and LinkedIn. My name is Eitan Suez. I'm your host, and again, here you see the URL to our landing page. And the objectives of these Tech Talks is, by and large, learning and sharing knowledge about these technologies, and going further and getting to know the people behind them as well. So the diverse members of the community. We've had a number of guests in the past, and I've got a number of exciting guests also lined up, both today and in upcoming episodes, and I'll share that with you momentarily. On previous episodes, I'd like to do a little bit of a recap. On May 20 was the last day of KubeCon EU, and our Tech Talk was all about doing a report of our experience at KubeCon. So if you've missed that, check out the KubeCon EU report. And then last week, we sort of went back to basics and delved into a technical topic from the Istio documentation having to do with a multi-cluster installation scenario. So if you haven't seen that one, all of our episodes are captured in our playlist on our YouTube channel, the Tetrate YouTube channel. So just follow that link to get there. I'd like to welcome you. If you're with us live, don't be shy. Go ahead and put a message in the comments, say hello or what have you. And we're happy to have you. If you're a first-time visitor, thank you for joining. If you're a repeat visitor, we're happy to see you back. And without further ado, let us go ahead and discuss today's episode. So the episode is all about learning a little bit more about Tetrate's Certified Istio Administrator by Tetrate exam. It's the acronym is the CIAT. And if you've been considering obtaining this certification or taking the exam, this episode is really for you. Here we're going to explore the exam. We're going to talk about what it is, how do you register, what are the prerequisites, all kinds of questions surrounding this particular exam, getting to know more about it and ways to prepare and pass the certification. And we see here, wonderful. So Janusz, thank you for joining. It's great to have you on our Tech Talk. Thank you for joining. So who better to explore this subject than my colleague, Peter Jausovec, who's also, of course, a Tetrand. Peter helped create this exam, and so hopefully we can mine some great information from him. At Tetrate, Peter is responsible for much of Tetrate's education activities. He's the author of our popular Istio Fundamentals course on Tetrate Academy, and as well as the Envoy Fundamentals course. And he's also involved in many other education-related activities, such as customer training, doing workshops. You might have attended some of his WebAssembly courses and so on. So what I'd like to do is bring him on. Give me just a second to get him on the stream here.
Hello, hey. I'm here.
Thank you for joining. It's great to see you. Welcome to the Tetrate Tech Talks. I know I gave a brief introduction, but I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself properly.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, and you pronounced my last name correctly, which is kudos to you. I'm a software content engineer at Tetrate. I work on a lot of educational materials, as you said. Our Tetrate Academy courses, our workshops, live and online and in-person workshops that we do together, A10. And I've also worked on the Certified Istio Administrator by Tetrate exam, which is, well, as the name suggests, it's a Certified Istio Administrator exam. And it's an online exam that basically consists of a set of performance-based problems that the candidates need to solve on an actual virtual machine, right, in an environment with Kubernetes clusters, with Istio installed, etc. So you have a Kubernetes cluster. You basically get a VM that you can access through the browser. That VM has access to multiple Kubernetes clusters where you can then go to solve different problems. So I have a couple of slides. So let me just put those slides on so I don't speak blindly, right? So as I said, set of practical problems to solve. And if you've done CNCF's, any of the CNCF's Kubernetes exams, the environment is very similar, right? So you sign up, you have a proctor that's watching you. You have to make sure you have one monitor. You have to make sure you have a camera on. They will validate your identity before you actually go and take the exam. So it's a proper exam. It's not just a set of multiple choice questions, for example, that you can solve on your own time with access to everything, right? So as I said, set of practical problems to solve. There's around 18 hands-on scenarios, problems that you have to solve. And we also have a set of 5 multiple choice questions on top of that. And we give you 2 hours to complete the exam, to go through all the items and to complete the whole exam. Now, typically what people ask is, right, like, what's on the exam? What do I need to know to actually go and pass the exam? And well, prepare for the exam first and then to pass it. So the slide shows a very high-level breakdown of categories of problems and questions that you can expect in the exam. So I'll start with the upper left, which is installation upgrades and configuration. So a couple of examples of questions that you can expect here are pretty much Istio operator related, right? So make sure you know your Istio operator API. Make sure you know how to customize and how to configure different Istio components. And also how to do and use overlays to customize those components, right? And of course, you'll have to deploy this, install Istio on the cluster. The next section or category is the traffic management, and this is the majority of the exam. Majority of the questions are traffic management related. So in here, what you need to do is you need to understand and know how to control, let's say, sidecar injection. This is the sidecar resource that you should be familiar with. You should know all the other Istio CRDs, so resources such as gateway resource, service entry, virtual service resource. So how to configure ingress and egress gateways, how to add entries to the internal service registry, understand how traffic routing works, how to configure routing between different service versions. You have to understand destination policies, so you can know how to define those, and then also things like traffic mirroring, for example. So you can think of an example question or a scenario that might pop up here is, in this specific namespace, we have 3 services running. Create any Istio resources that are needed to route 20% of the traffic to service 1, 40% of the traffic to service 2, and then 40% of the traffic to service 3. So that's an example question that you might get from this category. The next category is resiliency and fault injection. So You need to know how to configure outlier detection, for example, how to use resiliency features, that's timeouts, retries, and then how to configure failure injection as well, right? So you can inject delays, you can inject aborts, for example. So you can get a feel for what type of a question you would get here. Example is define a retry policy, right, with these parameters, or configure outlier detection for this specific service with these parameters, right?
Wow.
Next one is the securing workloads section, and this is basically testing your understanding of security features that Istio has to offer. So you should know things such as how to set up and configure peer authentication, for example, how to this involves mutual TLS, of course, defining it and configuring it at multiple different levels, and then also how to configure authorization policies. And then finally, the last section is what we call the advanced scenarios. Now, the things here, the themes in this category are more around understanding how to onboard non-Kubernetes workloads to the mesh, so VMs, how to do that, service entries, workload groups, and so on. How to customize Envoy configurations using the Envoy filters. And then we also have a section on how to troubleshoot configuration issues. So you can expect a question where you're given a certain namespace, and in that namespace, there's a workload that's failing to start. Investigate what's wrong, figure out how to fix it, and then actually go and fix it. So this is like a high level overview of things, of areas that you should know, you should be familiar with before you go and attempt this exam. Now, typically, once you know this, the next question is where do I go to learn about this, right? What are some of the materials? So the first one is, of course, our Istio Fundamentals course, which is free. It's on Academy, and that one will actually go through all the areas that I talked about. So not only theoretical, conceptual things, but each section in that fundamental course also has one or more labs, practical labs. So if you go through that, if you go through all the practical labs and actually understand them, actually set up your own cluster, go through it, understand it, you should be in a very good spot to prepare for the exam. The next one is our Istio 0 to 60 workshops. I think we have one coming up,
we do,
right, this month, right? I didn't have the direct link, so just go Tetrate.io events. Yeah. We're running these monthly, and the purpose of those workshops is just to get you from, as the title suggests, from 0 to 60 on Istio. If I would be preparing for the exam, I mean, it depends. Istio 0 to 60 is really good because it's live and you can you have a chance to ask questions. So if you're already familiar with Istio, but you have some specific questions, join that one, ask questions. Definitely go through the course, because that one will give you the like all the basics, all the like groundwork, and good overview of everything. Of course, Istio documentation, very exhaustive. There's a lot of good examples there as well. So I'm always suggesting people to look at some of the areas in the curriculum, right? Go to the Istio documentation, see the examples and samples that are presented there. Make sure you understand them, go through that. And then, of course, our YouTube channel, where Eitan is doing the Tech Talks. We also have like a playlist of Istio weekly episodes where we discuss or go deeper into specific Istio topics. So that's always a good resource. And then finally, the Tetrate Slack community. This is the community where me and Eitan and our Tetrans are constantly on, not 24 hours, but we are on enough to see any of your question, to answer any of your question, either be it Istio, Envoy, or exam specific, right? So that's definitely a good good resource to use as well.
Good place to go. Yeah, if you've got questions, something that's not answered anywhere, you can get on Slack. That's what it's all about. Just interactive.
Yes, yeah. Or if you went through the workshop and you didn't get a chance to ask a question, or you went through the course but something's not clear, pop over to the Slack. We'll gladly help you out and answer your questions that you might have. Now you have the materials, you know the curriculum. A question is, well, what can I use on the actual exam, right? What can I do? What can I use? What's on the machine? What's installed there? So there's Visual Studio Code installed for all your YAML editing needs, and there will be a lot of YAML editing that you'll be doing and configuring. You can also use Emacs, Vim, whatever your flavor of the terminal editor is. Those are installed as well. It's an Ubuntu machine, so whatever is installed by default should be able to use those as well. There's also, of course, Kubernetes CLI and Istio CLI. The version of Istio CLI is 1.13. And then you also have access to the Istio documentation, right? So note that the proctor will be watching your screen. You are only allowed to have a single monitor, and that monitor, the contents of that monitor will be shared with the proctor. But you'll be able to access the Istio documentation within the exam environment, right? So make sure you're familiar with the layout of the documentation so you can go and reference different things there. And I've also have two remaining slides where it's mostly about different tips that we gathered from, last year we did an episode with one of the people who took the exam, right? And he came up with a couple of tips. We had a couple of tips from other exam takers that were either sent to us or posted in. I think we have a couple of links that we can share later on, right?
That's right. Yes, I have them.
Yeah, with some tips that of people who went through the exam and passed the exam, right? But in general, I want to go through these. These are more of a gist of everything, right? Is make sure you practice all the examples from the fundamental scores and Istio docs, right? Make sure you go through the labs. With the purchase of the exam, I know we haven't talked about that. So once you purchase the exam, what you get is you'll get 2 invites. One will be for a practice exam, and the second one will be for the actual exam that you take. So the idea is, once you register, once you purchase the exam, you go and register for the practice exam first. So this one, the practice exam, runs in the exact same environment as the real exam. There is only 5 questions, 5 scenarios in that exam. You still have 2 hours to go through everything, but the idea of the practice exam is for you to familiarize yourself with the environment and the actual look and feel of the real exam, right? We don't want to throw you into something where you're like, I have no idea what's here, right? So make sure you use that practice exam to practice, right? Open istio.io docs, scroll through the docs, copy paste, open the editor, get familiar a little bit with that environment if you haven't used it before, right? It's a really good thing. Now, the other things are some of them are very generic. Be calm during the exam, of course, right? That's easy to say, harder to do, but
I like to say, get a good night's sleep the night before. That's
course.
Been one of my rules.
Of course. But to make you even more calmer, right? Even if you don't pass the first time, we do give you a free retake, right? So don't be too nervous, right? So if you mess up, don't worry, you get another free retake, and I'm pretty sure you're going to pass on the second one, right? Also, once you solved all the problems, cross-verify if the solution is actually working or not. Make sure that can always be some typos either in the name or somewhere, right? So make sure that you double check that you've actually solved the problem. Time management is important, right? There is a lot of editing and applying YAML manifests, so make sure that you practice that. One thing that you could do is make sure you know where you can find boilerplate YAML for different resources, so you have them ready and you can just copy paste them and configure them as needed. Mentioned Istio documentation. That's the resource that you can use. So make sure you're familiar with it. Make sure you know where to find different things, right? You don't want to be, you can use the search function, but it's better if you actually know that, oh, the destination rule is in this, like in this section of the documentation, and know exactly where you need to go. Be comfortable using the Kubernetes CLI and Istio CLI. So Kubernetes CLI specifically, and I'm calling out switching contexts here, Kubernetes contexts. You will be given 2 different clusters. So make sure you know how to actually switch the context from one to another. Just make sure how to do that, because you don't want to spend a lot of time on things like that. Related to this, use aliases for kubectl and istioctl. So do alias k equals kubectl, alias I equals istioctl, whatever works best for you. You can also enable command completion. That might be helpful as well. And then be time conscious. If you run into a question that seems difficult and you're like, oh, I can't deal with it right now, you can switch, right? You can go to the next question. You can go between the questions as you wish. It's not like you can't go back or forward. Can we use bookmarks, Istio documented? So not really, because you are in a like an examination environment. So that machine gets prepared a couple of hours before your exam. So you can't really set up your bookmarks like that.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate, because that could save you some time, but that's really not allowed. So what's the fallback? The fallback is, like Peter said, be sure you know exactly how to navigate things, where to go, sort of committed to memory.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that's good is that the actual Istio documentation is very
it's very well laid out. I agree.
Yes, it's very well done. And theoretically, you can go to let's say the traffic management section and the concepts, and you can get gateways, you can get service entries, you can get virtual services, you can get everything for that from that one page, right? So you don't necessarily have to click around a lot to and that's like a 40% of the questions that you're going to get, right? So there's not, I know it sounds daunting to, so make sure you're familiar with the documentation, but if you're methodical about it, there's pretty much 3 or 4 areas that you have to know how to get to, and that's it, right? There's not nothing more than that. And what else? Did I miss any of the tips?
Oh, don't worry, I've got a whole slew of questions for you, Peter. So if there's any gaps there, we're gonna ferret it out of you.
Yeah, so I think that was like for my slides, I think that was my last slide. I didn't,
Perfect.
It's hard to click next on a disabled button, so there's no...
Good. So in that case, we can maybe segue from this wonderful presentation to my list of questions. I would like to have a chance to interview you over the next maybe 20 minutes or so. I've got a list of questions, many of which you've already answered, and that doesn't surprise me. For our audience, I've been working with Peter for some time, and I know that he's very thorough and methodical and thinks ahead of time of all the types of questions you might want to ask. So thank you so much for this presentation, Peter. So just to make sure, I'm going to repeat some of the things you said to make sure that I've got it right and for the sake of our audience. So in terms of the format and the parameters of the exam, the duration is 2 hours. Is that
exactly? Right? Yep, exactly.
And like for those of you who have taken the Kubernetes exams, you know what a performance-based exam is. That is, it's by and large not multiple choice, although there are, I think, a few multiple choice questions at the end. But it's all about solving problems and troubleshooting things in real time, right? So that's what we call a performance-based exam.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's not just you're not going to get 5. There are 5 multiple choice questions, right? We can say that there's 5 of them where you're going to have an option. You'll have a question and you can pick one of the answers, right? But majority of the items of the questions will be very practical. So you actually have to know how to use Istio. It's not just, I can just cram for this one thing and read about it, and then by the do the elimination in the questions and then figure out the
Yeah.
answer somehow. Yeah, you actually have to know Istio to go through this and pass this exam.
I know exactly what you're referencing there. Okay, and I think the term that is used is open book, right? To mean that you're allowed, while taking the exam, to check the reference documentation. And that's the istio.io website. It's not everything. You can't just Google, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah,
did,
yeah.
you probably would get penalized, or maybe your exam would be canceled. So you just remember, it's just the Istio docs that you can access.
Exactly. Yeah. It's Istio docs. And as I said, everything is in Istio docs anyway, right? So you have all the answers there. However, don't expect to have enough time to be able to Google everything and just
Right.
look it up, and then you're not going to pass the exam like that, right?
Yeah, so you need to prepare.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the biggest, most logistical question in my mind, which I've already answered for myself, but for the benefit of our audience again, is if you are at the beginning of your journey right now, it does not mean that you can't register to take the exam today, because you're given, I think, 12 months to schedule the date when you will take the exam.
Yes.
And so you can register. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. You're completely right. So once you go through with the purchase, you will have 30 days to redeem the invite. And redeeming the invite, during that redemption process, you'll be able to schedule the exam up to 12-month period, right? 12 months ahead, a year ahead, right?
Got it.
So we just want you to make sure that you, like, I know some people like purchase this and then they're always like procrastinating. At least that's what I would do, right? I would procrastinate. I don't want to, it's not the right time to do it now, right? So we're like, no, well, we give you 30 days, right?
To decide.
When in the future are you going to take the exam. But at least it's kind of a forcing function, right? To have you go and register for it. Does all the questions have the same weightage? No. So if I go back to the there are the weightage is this, right? So this is also the number of questions as well as the weight of the questions, right? So traffic management, 40 and 2020, and then yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So example would be like if there's 18 questions, right? You can see there's going to be one question related to installation configuration upgrade. There's going to be 2 questions related to advanced scenarios and so on, right? So you can figure it out like that.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat a couple of the things you've already said. One is once you've registered, you can take a practice exam, you schedule it, and it gives you familiarity with the environment, and then schedule the real exam. And if you fail that, you have a free retake, which is, I think, familiar to folks who have taken the Kubernetes.
Yes. Yeah, and free retake is typically like if you're gonna free retake is if you actually show up and take the exam and fail. So make sure you, even if you're not ready, even if you're not prepared, make sure you show up. You know you're gonna fail, right? You haven't prepared, but you're gonna get a free retake. Just please don't schedule an exam and then don't show up because
that makes sense,
right? You
want to be responsible.
There's other people involved in this, right? Like there's a proctor, right? They have to prepare the machines and everything, right, up ahead. So and if you have to cancel or reschedule, make sure you do it at least 2 days before your scheduled exam, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a list of questions lined up for you, Peter. My first one is this. I know the title for the exam is Certified Istio Administrator by Tetrate. And does that mean that, if you're more of a developer persona, you're working on the dev team, don't do as much administration, does that mean that you should not consider taking this exam?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's whether you're like a DevOps engineer, an administrator, someone who's administering like the Istio installation, or you're a developer, I think there's value in. There's nothing specific to one or the other persona, right? So don't shy away. Don't let the title push you away from taking this exam. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And it's just the one exam. It's not like there's a CKA and the CIAT. Here we have the one Istio.
I don't think there's enough like differentiation, right?
I agree.
So
it would warrant two separate exams, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Here's another question. Do I need to have passed my Kubernetes certification exams and as prerequisites before I take this one?
No, but like my thinking is, if you're going to use Istio, you're probably familiar with Kubernetes as well, but you don't have to necessarily take any, like, we have people who haven't taken Kubernetes certification that have passed Istio certification. So
Right.
you don't necessarily, like, my assumption is, if you're using Istio, if you're trying to get certified with Istio, you already know some Kubernetes, right? But definitely not a prerequisite to get certified on Kubernetes before. Yeah.
All right. My next question was going to be about the curriculum, but you've already covered that and rather thoroughly. But maybe the only thing I want to leave for our audience is a little bit of a trail. I know that there is, I'm going to ask you, since or maybe I can just take over I'm going to take over here and I'll pop up my browser. And I want to show you when you visit the Tetrate Academy, and you go to the landing page for the Certified Administrator exam, which is the page that you're staring at right now. At the very bottom, I think, is a link to the handbook. And the handbook is really a well put together summary of everything you need to know, and including the logistical information. And in there is a section that repeats everything that Peter has already mentioned, but if you want to review it one more time, here you have specific bullet items for every one of the sections. For example, resiliency section, 20%. These are the things you want to prepare for. So you want to make sure and get your copy of that handbook and review that list and identify the gaps, what areas you want to what areas you want to cover. And
everything should be explained. There's a lot of other things in that handbook as well, right? Things on how to schedule, how to reschedule, how to get in contact with us, all of those things. But the other thing that I want to say is, once you go to the Academy website, once you purchase the exam, you also get access to I don't want to call it a course, but it is a course in the terms of that website, right?
Yes, there's a number of sections. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, there's a couple of sections there that explain, hey, here's how you get registered, here's how you get prepared, right? It's not a course in terms of, I'm gonna it's not gonna teach you Istio. It's a course in a section.
Meta course.
Yes, yeah. It's more of a here's how you register, here's how you do this. Yes, but all of that information is in the handbook as well. So
I really like that you included a very, I think, exhaustive list of resources for studying and preparing. So that's terrific. I like to always say, the internet's your friend. There it is. Thank you for bringing it on screen. But feel free to complement that with other. I love this idea of getting information from so many different sources. So go ahead and buy, if there's a book out there, Istio Up and Running, I think is a little dated, but it helps you with the concepts. And maybe some of us are consume information more easily using a different medium than another person. So that's also something you can
use to your advantage. As you said, even within these resources here on the slide, if you're more of a visual learner, go with the videos, right? Go with the course, go with all those labs. If you're more a textual type of person or you prefer to read, you also get that from the course. So anything that's in the video, it's also in the text format. But then you also have the documentation, of course, and a community where you can ask questions, right?
Yeah, and I think you'll give me ideas also about maybe in future episodes of the Tech Talks, maybe we can go through some exercises, learn how to do traffic management, learn some of the resilience.
Yeah, for sure. If the audience, if this is something that people would be interested into seeing, maybe do a certification preparation episode or
I don't want to specifically target that, but at least to understand those concepts which are necessary. Yeah,
we can do that for sure. Yeah.
All right, so here's another question, and this is really something that I do not really know the answer to, is because Istio, one of the main components of Istio is Envoy, but Envoy is really behind the scenes. And my question to you, Peter, is how much should I study Envoy? How much do I need to know about Envoy to pass the exam, or what is your feel?
Yeah. So there are a couple of questions related to the Envoy filter resource. So
Okay.
knowledge of Envoy would be like, it's definitely going to help, but it's not necessary. So
Okay.
you don't need to know the inner workings of Envoy to be able to pass the exam, right?
Okay. Fair enough. Now, I think a lot of my questions are sort of driven by my familiarity with the Kubernetes certifications. I think it was about a year ago when I took my CKA and CIAT exams and prepared for them. I even went as far as when it was all fresh in my mind, I went ahead and published a Kube Academy course on preparing for the CKA. And I remember for those certifications, there were specific tasks that they said, you need to know how to do this. You need to know how to back up and restore a snapshot of your etcd database. And you're pretty much guaranteed that task was going to be on the exam. Are there specific tasks that for Istio that you need to know that are going to be on the exam?
Oh, it's definitely installing Istio.
Okay, that's the main one.
Yes, configuring the installation and then actually installing Istio. We have multiple variants of the exam, and all of the variants, you're going to be 100% sure that you're going to get a question on installing Istio for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So another question along the same lines is, I remember with again the CKA, using kubectl was obviously the main CLI we had to know inside out, but that wasn't the only one. We had to use OpenSSL to check certificate expirations, and there were other CLIs we had to know. We had to SSH onto worker nodes. What other CLIs besides istio-ctl does one really need to know?
So there's you're not going to be asked to SSH anywhere.
Okay.
So Istio CLI for sure, and Kubernetes CLI, right? And I mentioned specifically switching context, because you will have to switch context. So make sure you know how to at least to do that, but be familiar with just deploying resources requires Kubernetes CLI, right? But there's not going to be any too complex commands or something very
no IP tables.
No, nothing exotic that you would have to use either of those CLIs. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. All right. I remember, as a matter of fact, so I'd like to share with our audience the fact that I went ahead and took the practice exam yesterday, specifically to get to know the environment, and as part of my preparation for this interview. And it's funny how I myself fell prey to the most, one of the tips on here is about making sure to double check and to make sure that you answered your question. And I think there was a question in 2 parts that I had to work on, and when I figured out the first part, I was so happy that I'd figured it out that I forgot about the second part. And then on top of that, to add insult to injury, I didn't actually go back and recheck every one of my questions. So I ended up losing some points on that account. So why do I bring that up? I think the tips that you presented earlier are top of my mind, and one of them was make sure to double check thoroughly everything that you're asked, that you've answered every part of the question. Sometimes you've got it right, but you didn't answer everything. So
exactly, yeah. I think it goes back, if you want to make it very generic, is make sure you really read the question. There might be multiple bullet points, like, oh, make sure you do this, but also make sure you do this, and make sure you do that, right? So don't get too excited with the first one and then forget about the other 2, 3, 4, right? Yeah. It just goes back to the whole, and everyone's done that before, on not just this exam, on any other exam, say, oh, that's good, and then you just miss something, right? But yeah, just make sure you reread the question again after you think you've solved it, right?
Yep. All right, so the next bit I want to discuss is just very practical. I think everybody saw the price for the certification is $299, I believe, $299.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
And there's, I think, two things we want to let you know about that. One is when you take the Academy course, Istio Fundamentals, when you complete it, you automatically get a 50% off coupon.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that will reduce the price dramatically, and then I don't know how this works or if you can apply them both in combination. But if you would like a coupon code, we have one that we are happy to share with you that will give you 30% off. It's basically, the code is take 30 off. So when you register, if you put in that coupon code in there, it'll automatically take 30% off the sticker price. So that's just for all of you who have attended this episode and have interest, and if that helps you with the price, we're very happy to do that. Let's see what else. Yeah, okay. So this is something I was sort of reflecting on as I look back on. So that I was doing education at a company called Pivotal a few years ago, or actually not that long ago, but I started a little further ago, back when certifications exams were not very cool. I don't know if you know what I mean. It was something that I think I felt is more of a sense than the actual thing, but I sensed that it wasn't necessarily something that people took as seriously as they do today. And I know something's changed. I remember back in the day, a lot of the certifications exam were really, like you said earlier, multiple choice based.
Yeah.
And they were hard, of course, and they required preparation. But I think as a consequence of the fact that they weren't real problem solving, hands-on, that they were somewhat discounted by the community. And I would like to give you a little bit of an opportunity to opine on this, like in terms of how far have we come? Is the picture better today than it was before?
I mean, for sure, right? Like having like as you mentioned, multiple choice questions, right? That was what was available back then, technology wise, right? It was very hard to and still is maybe today, a little bit complex to prepare all these environments, right? Like, I don't think people talk a lot about how much preparation actually goes into creating a certification like this, right? This is not just, oh, we're just going to come up with some questions and then people are going to go through it, right, and solve it. Like we actually internally, right, if you think about a question that, as we mentioned earlier, right, a question where you have 5 different things that you have to accomplish in that questions, right? We can think of those 5 points as grading opportunities, right? So we either give you 1 point if you did that thing, or 0 points if you didn't, right? It's all good, right? So we have from our side, we have to think about these like problems and questions like that, and then on top of it, this is not manually being scored, right? There's no way, like it can scale if you have people manually going through all the exams and scoring them, right? So it's all automated, of course, right? All these scoring things are, all the questions that you go through will be scored automatically. We wrote some code to do that, right? What am I getting at is it's actually a proper, it's a proper scenario that you get tested on. It's not just, oh, I'm just going to pick B because A and C sound two outlandish answers to that question. Like everyone's done that. Like everyone's done the multiple choice questions where you don't necessarily know what the right answer is, but by the process of elimination, you maybe can figure it out or increase your chances of picking the right one. Like with the performance-based items, you can't do that, right? You actually have to know how. Sure, you can go and Google the YAML. Like no one expects you to know the YAML
right
from head, right? But you actually have to go and do it. You have to know how to configure it. You have to know that, oh, if I do this, if I want to route traffic, for example, to multiple different services, I also have to have a destination rule with some subsets set, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just ABCD, right? Multiple choice questions. Yeah. So I think, if going back to your question, it's gotten better, of course, right? It's more realistic, I would say, right? And if you compare it to not going to go too extreme and talk about pilots. I'm going to talk about like driver's license, for example, right?
Okay.
Like imagine if you only had like a written test that you had to do for the driver's license, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't drive for sure, and I wouldn't be in the traffic. I wouldn't want to be in the traffic with other people who've only taken the written exam, right? So there has to be some practice to it. Same with technology, I think. If you're going to go for the certification, make sure there's
it real.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Make it real, make it realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
Super. Thanks. So I think this is really a good question by Nida. She's saying her hesitation personally is resources to prepare for the exam. Obviously, there's the course. She knows about the fundamentals course. But looking for more resources. I personally think, Kubernetes is so popular, right? That there's so many different like Udemy courses you can use to prepare. I guess Istio is not on that level of popularity yet, so there may not be that many sort of independent prep courses out there. What's your answer to this question?
Yeah, so there's no repository that would contain a collection of questions. But I mean, as I mentioned, the fundamentals course has a bunch of labs, right? So you can treat those as questions if you wish, right? Go through those. Istio 0 to 60 workshops. I think we have that like page with the labs. That's public as well.
Yeah, I'll be covering that. Yeah.
Right. So we have yet another set of practical questions / labs that you can go through. Istio documentation, right? There's a lot of examples there as well.
Yes, a good part of that site is task-based, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, we don't have a repository that's like, oh, for installation, like this is the question you're going to get or something, right? It's more of a know how to route traffic between service A and B, for example, right? I know I mentioned this example multiple times, but like if you know how to do that, right, conceptually, if you know what's involved, you know that virtual service is involved, you know a destination rule is going to be involved. It doesn't really matter if there's 3 subsets, 2 subsets, 1 subset, or if you're doing 50-50 split, if you're doing 30-30-30-10, whatever split, doesn't really matter. It's the concept that I know how to do traffic routing, right?
Yeah. And my general advice, this says it's not specific to this certification exam, any certification exam. If you don't feel particularly easy with presenting yourself, maybe you should listen to that. That is, it's very important that you build up some practical experience with it. It's not just about studying. It has to become complemented with experience, things that you can almost fall back on from things you've done in your work. So if you feel that you're not there yet, there's nothing wrong with waiting another 6 months, building up that experience, and then you'll see that apprehension will go away, and you will be ready to take and pass the exam.
And it's also, think about like even if you're not directly using this at work, right? And if you just want to do it because you're interested in the technology, right? Set up your own cluster, right? Install Istio on it, play with it, install Istio with 2 Ingress gateways. Install Istio with 1 private, 1 public, right? Deploy 3 different services, route traffic, see how that works. Look at Grafana, right? Like, all those.
Explore, pick your curiosity.
Exactly. Yeah. Explore a little bit. Like, oh, how can I prove that, for example, right? How can I prove that the retries are actually working, right? How would I know that specific 3-2 line configuration that I put into virtual service is actually working correctly, right? How can I do that? And then you will be like, oh, okay, so I need this application, and then I'll deploy this, but then how can I make this application like fail on the 3 tiles? Like all the how can I see it in Grafana? How can I see it in Zipkin? Like all these things, right?
And it's remarkable to me how much you learn in the process. You ask yourself these questions, and by the time you got your answer, you learned all kinds of diagnostic commands that you can run that gives you the information of ways to curl your workload and to verify. And those will help you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And don't be like, I see Kyle was mentioned that the stuff shifts quickly, right? if you're preparing for the exam, the version of Istio that we're using is 1.13, right? And we're not using anything that's like in beta or
Right.
And there's also not a lot of like, I mean, there are new features coming into Istio, but it's not like it's a fairly stable product, I would say, right?
I agree.
So just stick with that version if that's what worries you, and then look at the documentation, look at the examples, and go through that. Yeah.
Well, Peter, thank you so much. What I'm going to do next is just share with our audience some of the links that we've mentioned. Some of them we haven't mentioned. So link to the Tetrate Academy, of course, and this is all on our landing page. So it's very easy. Should be easy for you guys to basically get to that page and follow them. There is, I called out a few things. One of them is, I think was a blog entry on the Tetrate blog that's a little bit dated, but I really loved it. It's entitled How Istio Certification Can Give You a Cloud Native Edge. So I went ahead and put that in there. I love the fact that folks who have taken the test have independently blogged about their preparation and their experience with the exam. So we're giving you that link there and you can sort of follow that. Also, I think, Peter, you mentioned an Istio weekly episode.
Yeah.
So that link is there. This is a video recording on YouTube with someone who actually took the certification exam. The link to the handbook, that PDF we showed you earlier. And this was kind of cool. Like somebody who took the exam went ahead and shared their tips, their own tips on our Slack channel. So what you're seeing here is essentially an independent person who took and passed the exam and shared their own personal sort of tips to you as you consider taking the exam. So I went ahead and threw that in there. Okay, so as far as upcoming events, and this also relates to some of the things Peter mentioned, we have on June 14th an upcoming Istio 0 to 60 workshop, and those are all available for you to peruse and access on our Tetrate events website. So you could see, for example, right here, our Istio 0 to 60 workshop. And just by clicking through there, you can register for that workshop. Those are free workshops, by the way. And we also have a WASM extensions workshop and a few other events taking place that you might want to check out, which has nothing to do with certification. But if you want to learn, for example, a little bit about Tetrate's product, the Tetrate Service Bridge, we've got an introduction to it coming up in the free event on June 8th and 9th, depending on your locale. As to, I'm going to try to wrap it up here, upcoming episodes. So next Friday, I hope to see you all. This will be a kind of a fun and different type of episode where we're going to interview a Tetrand, one of the members of our R&D team, where we're going to talk about web application firewalls. So if that's something we haven't talked before in the Tetrate Tech Talks, and I think it'll complement our sort of the variety of the topics that we discuss nicely. So be prepared to learn a great deal about that. And again, I don't think we need to mention certification here, but definitely our Slack channel. So if you have follow-up questions and this episode is over, you can still contact us, reach us, and ask very specific questions, and we're all monitoring those channels, and we'll be happy to help you. And with that, I think we're ready to close our episode and say thank you to everyone who joined. If you have any last-minute questions, we're happy to entertain them. Peter, I would like to thank you for coming on. Really appreciate us covering this subject. I think this is something that our community pays attention to. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to discuss it in depth.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
My pleasure. All right. Well, we'll see you all next Friday. And again, thank you for joining. Bye-bye.